Hello, everyone, and welcome on in. It's the first 12 team playoff. Let's get excited. Well, maybe get excited for it. The point spreads may not suggest that there's close games in store, but you know what? We're going to try and hope that at least two of these games are competitive. The first round of the college football playoff Friday night, Indiana Notre Dame. Saturday, SMU Penn State, Clemson Texas, and Tennessee and Ohio State, a game that is a house divided around these parts. So we'll get into that. But first and foremost, guys, I know we talked about this really briefly last week, Beef. What's your take on these games having no spread lower than 7 points? Is it just how the back four, the 9 through 12 seeds are this season? Do you think it's reflective of home field advantage? What do you make of four spreads at 7 points or higher?
Well, I think one situation, like at Clemson, they probably shouldn't even be in the playoff. I don't think anyone's saying that they're one of the 12 best teams. That's kind of the sticking point to me there. And then, sure, I definitely think home field advantage has to be lumped into it. But also, like we've talked about Indiana all season. How really good is Indiana? Are they 11-1? Are they just a product of their schedule, or are they a good team? And obviously, these things have figured themselves out throughout most of the year, and I assume they'll figure themselves out as well in this first round.
Yeah, I mean, how many years are we going to get Indiana, SMU, and Clemson? All of those types of teams, all in the top 12. Obviously, you're always going to have. I think the 5-12 game is always going to be a big spread because the 12 seed is always going to be a team that's only in because of a conference championship, almost always. I would think. So there's always going to be at least one game with a big spread. 6-11, yeah, we can always assume maybe there will be one team who gets in with a weak schedule. But you would hope that maybe there's two games that are, really close spreads, I think, going forward. And I think if I had to guess, that would be how it breaks out. I also think one of the spreads is just wrong, to be honest. And I understand that I'm with the public on it. I think that there is a game that should be an extremely close spread, in my opinion. I think there's a game that should be very up in the air.
We're going to go in chronological order, but I think the last one we talk about is going to be the one that we all kind of have a pretty hot take on. But let's start with Friday night. The rare Friday night game in South Bend, Indiana, between the Hoosiers of Indiana, the 10 seed, an in-state game as well against the number 7 seed Notre Dame. Spread is 7.5 in favor of Notre Dame. The over-under is 51, and the Indiana money line currently sits at plus 230. And look, there's two things we're going to point to in this matchup. Is Indiana getting their doors blown off at Ohio State? It's 38-15 game. They scored early. They scored late. There really wasn't much in between. And the Notre Dame just running through their schedule after the week 2 loss to Northern Illinois, which was, looking back on it, more of a blip on the radar than anything. Can Indiana keep this game close, I think, is the big question mark in this game, because we know what Notre Dame is. They're a known quantity. And the one game where Indiana was supposed to be a challenger against Ohio State, they fell flat. And if you think Notre Dame is a better team than Ohio State, well, then I think your decision's made up. What do you guys think of the way this game will play out?
Yeah, I think it's fair to bring up the Ohio State game just because of the type of team that Notre Dame is with the type of team Ohio State is. I think both teams are physical, kind of running teams. And I think you can expect them to try to emulate exactly what Ohio State did to Indiana and try to just beat them on the line of scrimmage. And at a certain point, we talked about it the week of Ohio State and the week after Ohio State when Indiana played them. It stops being, Siggs is a great coach. There might be a chance Indiana has a coaching advantage when it comes to Siggs and Marcus Freeman. But at a certain point, it stops being about the X's and O's and starts being about the Jimmies and Joes. And I think the Notre Dame defensive line and offensive line is going to be able to kind of dominate the line of scrimmage. I think Notre Dame's going to be able to run the ball and slow down the game. And I don't really think Indiana is going to be able to run the ball at all on the other side.
Yeah, when you look at Indiana and their rush defense, I think that's been one of the key points for them this year and why they were able to have so much success. Teams weren't able to run on them. But you can also look at it as they're a team that got out to leads and a lot of big leads this year that teams were forced to throw from the start. One, like a smaller bet that I'm going to place on this game, and I'll start it off with I like Notre Dame to win. I think that they're going to eventually cover the game as well. But Indiana has been a really fast starting team this year, 10-1-1 on the first quarter money line this year. You get them at plus 164. You've given them some extended rest. I think they're going to have a really good scripted first 10 to 15 offensive plays. So a little side bet there that I'm looking at, first quarter Indiana money line. We talked about it already, but that first drive against Ohio State marched right down the field and looked like they belonged. And then from there on, it wasn't much of a ball game. But that's a little side bet I'm looking at. But I do like Notre Dame to win this one, to cover as well over this 10-game win streak. Average margin of victory, 30.6 points per game. They've been pretty dominant ever since Northern Illinois.
Let me pose this if you want to do the quarter bet, because I when it comes to bowl season, I'm all over like the half props and the team totals and stuff like that. Indiana, their first half team total is 9.5. Is that too much for you? Or if you're playing that first quarter, you just want to play the first quarter money line?
I just think they've been really good on those first opening drives and the scripted plays. They've dominated. I think they've won at least half of those first quarters by double digits as well, by 10 or more.
Beef, I know that you're loving the unders in the first round of the playoffs. Is this one that you look at with the potential for a little bit more of an over than maybe Tennessee, Ohio State, or maybe Texas, Clemson? Because I actually think a bet that I'm not placing. I backed off of placing it, but I do think Notre Dame team total over 29.5 is worth a look. You look at, I mean, you just said it. The average, just the margin of victory has been 30.6 points since Northern Illinois, let alone the amount of points they've been putting up. You know, they've had 49s, 56s sprinkled in there. And I do think there's a chance that they pour it on, at least offensively. Does that give you any sort of pause with the total in this game?
I just think the way that Notre Dame's going to want to play, they're going to want to do what they've done all year and kind of just dominate with the running game. The only hope I think that they could potentially have for that is if Indiana's forced to throw and they're down big and they've got to come up from behind and throw the football. But Indiana's been really good at taking care of the football this year. They haven't really put it in harm's way as much. I don't think any of these games necessarily are going to be super high scoring, so I'd probably stay away from that.
I'll to the quarter odds real quick, Beef. At DraftKings Sportsbook, you can bet on Indiana's first drive result, punt minus 135, a field goal attempt. They don't even have to make it. A field goal attempt is plus 450, a touchdown plus 245. So to go to your fast start there, even if you just want the drive itself and you don't want to sweat out the first quarter money line, I think that's the way to approach it as well. Because like you said, the scripted plays have been very good. They went down the field on Ohio State in the first quarter. That's something I think maybe if you want to explore the props on that bet, instead of sweating out the first quarter line, you could probably look into that one as well.
Sign me up.
I love it. I know Sean Brace will be nodding in approval of that type of bet. I can't believe in Indiana. Like we've sat here and praised Curt Cignetti for the job he's done all season, but they fell flat at Ohio State. And I personally think if you look at the entire season, you could make a case that Notre Dame's a better team than Ohio State. I don't think the differences are large between Notre Dame and Ohio State, but with the way Notre Dame's been playing defense and the way they've been putting up points, I mean, I think that's the most impressive part. If you look at the 4 units on the board here, Notre Dame's offense has been super consistent the entire season since that Northern Illinois loss. And oh, by the way, they've won some close games. If you want to call it, top 25 Army, Navy, and Texas A&M, they haven't played the best schedule, but they've beaten and beaten pretty badly the 3 teams that on their schedule that were top 25. I mean, even the A&M game was a slog. It still, I think, ended up winning that game by 10 points. So, I have to bet Notre Dame here at 7.5. I'm not scared of the hook. I think they're just a far better team. It is going to be fascinating to have the conversation looking forward, though, because on the future lines, they're favored against Georgia. That's going to be a fascinating discussion to have if we get to that point. But I think Notre Dame just is the better team, and Indiana kind of has to prove it to me. If Indiana goes out and wins this game or covers and keeps it close, then that's on me. But based off of what I've seen in front of myself all season from both these teams, there's no way I can't bet Notre Dame here.
I think that Notre Dame Georgia line is going to be totally dependent on how Notre Dame looks, because obviously that's the only data point that can change anything. But
is it dependent on Carson Beck?
I don't think he's. They announced he was out for the game, so I don't think he's coming back for it. So I think the only factor that can change is Notre Dame if they look maybe not convincing. In a win against Indiana. If you guys were ranking the 4 underdogs and chances to win outright, where do they rank for you? Indiana's, I think, 3rd for me.
Probably put them 2nd. Tennessee, Indiana, SMU, Clemson.
I would go Tennessee, SMU, Indiana, Clemson. I thought about flipping Indiana and Clemson, but I think that's probably unfair to Texas.
I think that's the fair order from like a neutral perspective. But based on my take in the Tennessee-Ohio State game, Tennessee would be 4 for me. Objectively, objectively speaking, yes. The order is like on likelihood of winning. It's Tennessee, SMU, Indiana, Clemson. But my personal opinion on the Ohio State-Tennessee game, I let Beef know last week what it is. And we'll get to that, but I don't think Tennessee has a chance in hell of winning that game. But we'll get to that in a minute, because I think that's the most controversial game between the three of us. Any other final thoughts on Notre Dame? Any thoughts on the total at 51? I'm a little iffy on taking an under here, just because Notre Dame's been scoring on every drive, and I think Indiana. If you were to give me one bold prediction for this game, I think Indiana backdoors the over in the 4th quarter.
The one thing I'll say is Notre Dame's defense did not look very good last week against, or I guess 2 weeks ago, against USC and Mayava. They scored 35 points, and that's with 2 pick sixes in Notre Dame's own territory. Like the USC drove for a lot of yards in that game. If I'm worried about anything, it's probably the passing defense in the secondary. Benjamin Morrison, probably the best player on the team, is out. Christian Gray stepped into like a larger role. He was brutal. He ended up having a pick 6 to kind of ice the game, but was brutal up to that point. So I think that's the one thing. I would lean towards the over here. I like that Notre Dame team total over 29.5, though. If I was going to take a total, it would definitely be that more than the total at 51. But luckily, I last night put in a Falcons Notre Dame money line parlay. That way, Falcons won. The first leg's done. I can just focus on Notre Dame to win. I don't have to worry about them scoring 30. I don't have to worry about them winning by 8. I can just lock in on my Irish to hopefully win a big game.
Here's the most important question I'm going to ask. Take your objective hat off for a second. I know you're very good at that. Confidence level on a scale of 1 to 10 that Notre Dame wins. Forget the cover, just as a fan, Mark. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that they make it to the quarterfinals?
I'm pretty confident. I would say 7.5, 8. Like, okay. I'm pretty confident. 7.5 point spread. Like, I'd say I'm pretty confident.
I think they're gonna have to. I think they're gonna have to like hand Indiana the game. I don't think it's a situation where Indiana's going to outplay them. Notre Dame's just gonna have to shoot themselves in the foot multiple times. But who knows? They did lose to Northern Illinois.
Absolutely.
I don't think we're going to see that, though. I think Notre Dame's a well-oiled machine at this point.
9-2-1 against the spread this year as well.
They are very good. Moving on to Saturday's games, SMU and Penn State. Can we just dispel like the fact that like teams are going to melt in cold weather first and foremost? It doesn't get to 20 degrees in Texas, but it's still cold in Texas in the winter. That's how weather works. It's still cold in Knoxville. I think people are maybe – unless it snows. I don't know if there's snow in the forecast in Happy Valley on Saturday. But cold is cold. Like, I don't think, unless it's going to be negative 15 degrees at the frozen tundra, which they're not playing these games at, I don't think the cold is going to be the reason why SMU or Tennessee or loses a game. I just don't think so. That being said, I don't think SMU stands a chance against Penn State. Spread is 8.5. The total currently right now sits at 54 at DraftKings Sportsbook. SMU is plus 250 on the money line. I'm taking the under The under is my most confident play in this game at 54. Penn State's been fantastic at home defensively. I think that pass rush led by Abdul Carter, who can he go top 5, Mark? Is that like, what's his?
Seems like it seems like he's going top 5. I don't think he's that much of like I won't have him as a top 5, top 10 guy. Seems like that's where he is, just kind of as consensus in the industry. He's risen up the boards.
I mean, this is like a money-making 3 games for him.
Oh yeah, for sure.
More than anybody. ESPN has him as the number 1 player.
Wow.
Do they really?
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of buzz. I think the number 1 pick will be a quarterback and potentially even the number 2 pick. Right. And Travis Hunter will probably be up there. He's probably right there with like Ted McMillan, Will Johnson, a couple of Mason Graham, maybe a couple of those other guys right at the top.
Only his first year as an edge rusher is that's probably the main reason. They figure that there's untapped potential there.
Right. I think it's a money-making few weeks for Abdul Carter. Tyler Warren's, I think, already made his money. I think he's going in the first round pretty confidently. And Drew Aller's coming back. Like, everything for Penn State has been settled in terms of the future. The Pabula situation, the backup quarterback, is, I guess, a little frustrating because you do use him in certain situations. But how many gimmick plays are you really going to use in the playoff? And I think you kind of have to put those to the wayside and really just focus on what you're good at. So I don't know how much they're actually going to miss Pabula going to the transfer portal. And that's a whole other conversation for another day of how the schedule aligns with the transfer portal and the college football playoff. That's a whole other, we can talk about that in the offseason if we really need to. I think Penn State's defense is very good. I think SMU, while also very good as a team, I don't know if they can step up to the caliber of a top 10 Big Ten team. I think you're going to see the same thing with Clemson against a top 5 SEC team. I think Penn State is just going to handle business at home. I can see a very methodical, like 30-10 type game. If there's one thing you do know with Penn State, now look, last week in the Big Ten championship, I think was the exception where Oregon forced their hand and they had to play a high-scoring game. Usually in these types of games, Penn State wants to just methodically drive the ball down the field. You won't see it pass more than 25 yards. And that's even with Tyler Warren in the field. Penn State's wide receivers aren't really that impressive. I think that's pretty easy statement to make. They'll make 1 or 2 plays, but the playmakers are Tyler Warren, the tight end, and your 2 running backs, Singleton and Allen. And if the wide receivers are making a play, it's probably because Drew Aller is making a fantastic throw to them. But Penn State's going to methodically drive the ball down the field. They're going to take time off the clock. I just don't see how you get to 54 points when Penn State's going to just kind of shove it in their face of what they're good at. And SMU is going to have limited possessions. And we saw they got a little flustered at the start of the ACC championship game. They somehow came back, but I don't think the door is going to be open for them to come back against Penn State. I think you do see a very methodical win, just like you've seen James Franklin's team do against a lot of these teams, at least beneath them in the rank. I don't call SMU a lesser opponent, but teams beneath Penn State in the rankings, they usually, under Franklin, get the job done.
Yeah, James Franklin, 58-6 straight up as a home favorite, 92-16 straight up as a favorite in general. So these are the games that kind of reminds me of, obviously, higher stakes right now, but reminds me of that game against West Virginia in week 1. It was like a lot of people were on West Virginia in that game, but that was just a typical James Franklin and Penn State wins those games. The other games where they're a dog, different story, obviously. But if you're okay with biting some juice in this one, Penn State money line parlayed with Notre Dame money line, you get that to -128. If you're all right with biting a little juice on there, start off your Friday and Saturday with just a straight up win, and then you can roll over those winnings into the later games. But I like Penn State in this one too. The offense has been humming. You said it, Joe, like they were kind of forced to play from behind in that Oregon game, but they've scored 35 or more in 4 of the last 5 games. And maybe Aller, I know he had a couple interceptions, but maybe that was a good thing. That's kind of been his main gripe, I think, like his or his lack of like big time throws, being able to make huge game changing type of throws. He was forced to go out there and risk it a little bit last week, test it a little bit. I think that might have opened up some more options there for Penn State going forward and build some confidence. So I really like Penn State in this one. I don't think this one's going to be necessarily close. I'm probably not going to bet the spread. I'll probably take the under in this, and I think I'm going to do that Notre Dame Penn State moneyline parlay.
Here's what I'll suggest, because we're talking a lot about Penn State and their defense. SMU under 2.5 team touchdowns at DraftKings Sportsbook, not the team total on points, team touchdowns. If you look at the home games, just the home games in State College, 34-27 against Bowling Green is the kind of the exception to the rule. Kent State, who is the worst team in the FBS, got shut out. Illinois only scored 7 points. UCLA scored 11, and that was only boosted by a garbage time touchdown. Ohio State only scored 20 points in Happy Valley. Washington 6, Maryland 7. Penn State defends their home turf very well. I think if SMU scores, it might not be touchdowns. I think you get to a point in this game in the fourth quarter where you're feeling pretty confident with that prop, under 2.5 touchdowns for SMU.
I'm on the opposite side here of both. I like SMU to keep it close. I got it at +9 before it dipped back down to 8.5. I have serious concerns about the Penn State defense. And I'm also on the over. Give me SMU +9, and also give me over at 53.5. The last 4 games Penn State has played have went over. 4 of the last 6 games SMU has played have went over. You look at the amount of points SMU has been putting up: 48, 38, 33, 38, 31. And I know everyone loves Drew Aller right now. I'm still pretty relatively low on Drew Aller when it comes to the consensus that's out there. And I feel like people were, losing their minds about that Oregon game. He was 20 for 39 with multiple interceptions, and he made some big plays for sure. And the big story from that game was Penn State. Allen had 9 yards of carry. Singleton had almost 11 yards of carry. Aller had almost 11 yards per carry on 8 carries with him running the ball himself. So I don't think SMU is going to be giving up quite as many yards on the ground. I think part of that was Oregon got up pretty early and were kind of willing to kind of concede a little bit of that running game. And when Penn State tried to go to the air, I think you saw some of the issues out wide. I feel like a lot of people walked away from that Big Ten championship game, maybe kind of encouraged that they hung with Oregon. I kind of walked away more thinking that defense is a serious problem. They gave up 45 to Oregon, and I felt like Oregon could have scored more. I felt like they kind of got conservative in the second half. Yeah, and then I think this dates back to the Minnesota game, giving up 25 to Minnesota. I thought that they struggled with USC defensively earlier in the year. And I know we mentioned all the home opponents. I think that the home opponents were pretty rough offensively, like the UCLAs and the Marylands of the world. And even Illinois is not a team that I think is going to light it up. It depends where you're at on SMU. I'm not even necessarily that high on SMU. So this is more kind of skepticism in Penn State than anything else. But I guess I'm kind of saying prove it to Penn State a little bit.
That's fair. I think there's a lot of teams out there this weekend that need to prove it, because there's Oregon and Georgia sitting ahead, and I think a lot of people still need to prove it from Georgia next week as well. The one thing I'll say is, if you are in the fine state of New Jersey, the greatest state on planet Earth, which I will be on Saturday, look into Nick Singleton's rushing props. What they've done this year with the running back tandem of Singleton and Allen. Allen's gotten a bulk of the carries middle of the season. They saved Singleton for this specific part of the season. If you look, and I think he was a little dinged up, but he only had 6 carries against Ohio State. He only had 7 against Washington and Purdue in each game, but they've ramped him up over the last few games. 13 for 63 against Minnesota, 13 for 87 and 2 touches against Maryland, and then averaged 10.5 yards per carry against Oregon. I think he is the bell cow in this game. And if you look into props, I'm not sure. I don't have them in front of me because I'm currently in Pennsylvania. But if you are in New Jersey, take a look at Singleton props to score a touchdown as well. I think he is the bell cow in this game. Allen will get his carries for sure, but I think they're going to unleash Singleton for this moment. We all know about Tyler Warren. The wide receivers, like I said, not so great. Imagine if Penn State could actually grab one of those guys in the portal. They thought they had that with Julian Fleming, but it turns out There's a reason why he was buried on the depth chart at Ohio State. I look at Nick Singleton. He is the X factor in this game.
Yeah, they did just get that guy from USC, Hudson, I believe his name is. So potential, finally a good wide receiver there for Penn State.
If there's one thing they always complain about at Penn State, it's the lack of the wide receiver. They've always had tight ends, they've always had running backs, but that flashy kind of number one wide receiver has kind of been lacking them.
For you, Notre Dame has similar issues with wide receiver. For a long time, they were great at developing wide receivers.
Golden Tate,
Michael Floyd, Will Fuller. There's a bunch of other guys.
Whatever happened to Will Fuller, by the way?
Oh, he had
very
a great game.
Sidebar.
He had an amazing game, tested positive, and was never heard from again.
It's like they banished him.
Yeah, it really is a shame. His ankles were also like the worst ankles in the history of the sport. Every time he would have a good game, he would hurt his ankles. But there were other names I'm forgetting in there. For a long time, they were really good at developing wide receivers. I think I forget who it was, but there's a head coach out there now that was a wide receiver coach for Notre Dame in that stretch. I forget who it is, but it seems like the last decade or maybe a little bit less than that, though, it's been the same way with Notre Dame. You can't really find a lot of that outside talent.
Let's move on to Clemson and Texas. The biggest spread on the board is 12 points. The over-under is 52. Look, this is just a personal crusade of mine to not see Dabo Swinney on my TV after Saturday. I did not want to see Dabo Swinney on my TV after the ACC championship. And then the self-righteous nonsense just kind of kept in. I'm like, I don't need to hear it. The curve on Dabo, like when Clemsoning was a thing and they were like, oh, they're the lovable losers, they can't get over the hump. We kind of felt bad for Dabo. And then they won national championships and like they peaked. And now we're at like we're going back down on the roller coaster where it's like, okay, we've seen enough of Dabo. We don't need to see Clemson anymore. He's starting to be insufferable with not entering the transfer portal on purpose. And I think we're at that point now where, like, if Clemson loses, I would not be opposed to seeing them kind of drift off into the sunset for like 2 or 3 years.
I think this is the game most that Texas is going to have to hand Clemson the game. I don't see a scenario where Clemson goes out there and outplays them at all. It's going to be Quinn Ewers goes out there and has 2 to 3 bonehead interceptions. And that's the thing I'm kind of most interested to see on Saturday. Like, if Texas starts slow, if Ewers starts slow in the first quarter, does he get the hook for Arch and see what happens from there? But this Texas defense is just too good that I don't think Clemson at any stretch is going to be able to go out there and outplay them. It's just going to have to be self-inflicted wounds from Texas in this one. And when you look at Texas and their defense, number 2 scoring defense at only 12.4 points per game, only allowed 20 or more in 3 games this season, and they rank 3rd in total defense at about 250 yards per game. The defense is just awesome, and it's going to keep them in this game regardless. Offense, though, has been struggling. Quinn hasn't looked great since really returning from his injury, only averaging 21.7 points per game over their last 4. So a little bit worried there about the Texas defense. I'm probably not going to take the 12, but it's another situation where I really like the under because I think Texas defense is that good, and I think the offense for Texas is a little bit too worrisome to trust them to score points right now.
Yeah, I this is the game I have the least opinion on. I'll be rooting for Texas. This is kind of like, people love the upsets in March Madness when you get a 12 or 13. But they don't realize that it ruins the Sweet 16 or it ruins the Elite 8. Like, if we need to have Texas playing the winner of Oregon versus the 8 or 9, like Oregon, Tennessee, Ohio State. Any combination.
You casting off Arizona State?
Yes. I'm saying we need Texas to win this game and next game, in my opinion, for it to be interesting. And you can say the same for Notre Dame to get to Notre Dame, Georgia. You could say the same for Penn State to get to Penn State playing the winner of Notre Dame, Georgia. Like, if you're saying we want the best matchups later on and we want to make sure that we're kind of determining the best team as the champion, then we should be kind of rooting for these. At least I think all the favorites we've talked about so far to win their games.
I agree with Beef. The under is the play in this game, 52. I'm surprised it was that high. Texas's defense, they've been holding teams to totals in the teens. Look at that Texas Georgia game. The game went to overtime and still got under. Although it got to be a little bit nervy once it got to overtime. The worst thing in college football is betting an under and having your game go to overtime. I think we've all been there before with that. But I think the under is the play. I would even probably feel confident putting Texas minus 12 on my card. I just think they're the better team. And look, the best unit on the field is Texas's defense. I think Cade Klubnik struggles a lot in this game. Look, the game against SMU, I think, is completely different from the matchup they're going to face against Texas. It's going to be far less wide open. And I think that the biggest – you mentioned Arch Manning there, Beef. I think the biggest question is, do we see Arch Manning in the second half? Like, do they preserve Quinn Ewers because he's been banged up this season? Do we get a little bit of look at Arch? Maybe they say, hey, like, hang around because the transfer portal is looming. I don't know if he'll go, but there's enough intrigue out there, right? UNC, they need a quarterback. We talked about that last week. What's the move there? But regardless of what happens in the portal, I think we do see Arch in the second half at some point. And maybe that leads to a little bit of rustiness. They've been using him in the rush game, but not much as a passer so far. So I think that also lends itself to the under. I think this game's going to be over, though, probably by the third quarter.
Well, you seem very confident in Notre Dame, very confident in Penn State, very confident in Texas, and it sounds like you're very confident in Ohio State as well. Would you be confident enough to parlay those four winners plus 194?
No, absolutely not. I know so much. I know better than that in college sports to parlay the four favorites because there's going to be one. I don't know which one. I don't feel confident in any of the four underdogs, but there's always going to be one that makes it very nervous. So no, I will not do that. But if you are interested in doing that, a Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas, Ohio State gets you to plus 194 at DraftKings. Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas gets you to plus 119. So that I think you could consider. But the Tennessee Ohio State game, I feel like some people
four-leg parlay is going to be everywhere. Everyone's taking that
absolutely
parlay.
100%. Or it's either going to be the three legs, the first three favorites, and like Tennessee spread or something like that. You're going to see a lot of cards out there. And look, there's a chance this goes chalk, right? I mean, you look at least with Indiana, SMU, and Clemson, they've all got flaws. And I think they can be exploited in those matchups. But I think that the leg that you have to worry about if you do a four leg on a game is in Tennessee, Ohio State, because I think at least some people, not me, but some people think that's going to be a close game.
I definitely
start it off first.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, and look, let's segue into it. Let's intro the spread. Tennessee, Ohio State. It's now 7.5 at DraftKings. It's been fluctuating between 7 and 7.5. Over under is 46.5. The Vols are plus 235 on the money line. I will open the floor to both of you first on Tennessee because that's where at least you two are aligned.
Yeah, I love Tennessee plus 7.5 in this game, and I'm a lot less bullish on who's going to win the game. To me, I think it's a total 50-50 toss-up. I really do think it's going to come down to, a field goal or maybe 6 points. I don't think either of these teams get to 21. I think this is a 20-14, 17-14, 17-10 type game. So in my opinion, if you're Tennessee, I really think all you need to do is get to 14 points. And I think you're going to cover that 7.5. I think when the bracket first dropped, I was kind of out there saying Tennessee's going to beat Ohio State. And part of that was just that I've been pretty high on this Tennessee team for a while. But more than anything, I'm just bullish that this is going to be a good game. This is going to be a close game. ESPN and the NCAA, the college football cognoscenti out there wants and needs this to be a close game, especially if some of these first 2 to 3 games go how I think that they're going to go. But the main reason that I like Tennessee is just Dylan Sampson, 1,485 yards, rushing for 6 yards a carry, 22 touchdowns. I think he might be one of the more under talked about guys in college football there, rushing for 22 touchdowns and almost 1,500 yards. He's also somewhat of a factor in the passing game with 20 catches as well. Like I think he's the type of guy that's going to keep Tennessee in the game at the very least. So I really, really like Tennessee to at least just keep it close.
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting matchup of the day, that Tennessee rushing offense versus Ohio State rushing defense. Both are top 10 in the country. Which one wins that, I think, is going to win this game. But I don't know if it's just that I've had a close eye on this Tennessee team all year, but we talked about it multiple times in that Oklahoma game. You saw them kind of take their foot off the gas in terms of the offense and go to a bit more conservative style. I'm in the camp that I think that they're going to open it up a little bit more in the playoffs, and they're going to have to. If they're going to make a run at this thing, they're going to have to step up and be able to make some throws. And I point right to that Alabama game. They had 5 to 6 deep shots, and Nico only hit 2 or 3 of them. But that's all he needed. That's all that team needs. With how good the defense is and how good the running game is, he just has to be able to step up and hit a few big throws. And the game I was at, the Kentucky game, he threw a few lasers. He also had a couple really nice plays, 2 drop touchdown passes in that one. His numbers haven't been that great this year, but I think there's some kind of misleading stats in there as well. Like he's looked really good over these past 3 to 4 weeks, and I think he's playing really confident right now. And I'm in the camp as well. I think Ryan Day is a coward. I think Ryan Day is spineless, and I can't wait to see them pan over to his face when Tennessee's up 10-0 early in the first half and the Boo Birds are coming down. I like Tennessee to go into the horseshoe and win this game outright and move on to the next round.
By the way, if you look at passing yards per game and things like that, Nico's having like almost the same season Aller is having, if you look at the stats. But if you look at the way Aller's being talked about coming into these playoffs compared to Nico, I feel like it's completely different. And I think I feel about the same about both of them.
I saw a list that had Aller as the number 1 quarterback, and I don't necessarily believe that Oregon's going to make the run to win it all, but if Dylan Gabriel's out there, he's the number 1 quarterback in this college football playoff. College quarterback, not necessarily pro, but you can't deny what Dylan Gabriel's been doing recently.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, I want to see your face when I say this because you're going to be flabbergasted. Ohio State's winning this game by 3 touchdowns.
I mean, yeah, you said it already, kind of.
Yeah. I'm doubling down. Look, if you have a spine, if you have any type of motivation left in your team, if you're Ohio State, you go out and prove they don't. That's what everybody's saying. But if you have that inside your locker room, you go beat the brakes off of Tennessee, this multi-million-dollar roster that was supposed to be the number 1 team in the country. If that's what you are, you win this game and deliver a massive statement to the entire country that you can win a national championship. And it starts with a home game against an SEC team who, by the way, hasn't been that great on the road this season. They've shown some weaknesses. Like you said, that Tennessee has kind of taken the foot off the gas on offense. That's what exactly left them in the 25-15 game against Oklahoma. Wasn't exactly impressive. Vandy jumped on them early before Tennessee pulled away, and their 2 losses came on the road. You have a young quarterback going on the road in a tough environment. That's if it's a tough environment, depending on who you believe, against a veteran quarterback in Will Howard, who I don't think he's great, but he has elite talent around him with Judkins at running back, with Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith at wide receiver. I think Ohio State has a massive, massive game, delivers a statement. And look, this is called gambling, right? I'm taking a gamble here. We think Ryan Day is a spineless coward and is going to get fired after this game. A lot of people think that, and that's why Tennessee is going to be an incredibly popular underdog, probably the only underdog that the public's going to bet this entire weekend in the college football playoff. I'm going to flip that. I think Ohio State blows them out. They have the top-ranked defense in the country, by the way. We're not just talking about this offense with all these studs. This defense ranks first in scoring defense, first in total yards allowed. That's going to be a really tough place to play for a young quarterback and an offense that has struggled on the road. And look, I know the Michigan game, a complete embarrassment for Ohio State. The defense still held them to 13 points. The defense wasn't the problem that day. It was the offensive execution and also the play calling. Play calling was awful. If you're Chip Kelly, too, dude, throw the ball. Don't run right into the gut, because if you do the same thing against Tennessee that you did against Michigan, you're going to get the same result. I think they air it out. I've been pinpointing this guy for a few big games now. Emeka Egbuka, one of the most experienced wide receivers left in the college football playoff. You can bet player props. I would bet him. I think he has a massive day. I think they feed him the ball. Jeremiah Smith kind of shows off as well. I think Ohio State wins this. It's going to be a very unpopular take in my own household. But Ohio State, I think, wins by 3 touchdowns.
I think part of why Chip was running so much in that game is because they're afraid of pass rush with all the O-line injuries that they have, and I think
Also
that's going to be.
potentially.
I think that could be a problem against James Pierce, everyone loves Abdul Carter, and I feel like Abdul Carter's jumped James Pierce. I still think James Pierce is the best edge rusher prospect in this upcoming draft class. So I just think that you look at last time Ohio State lost this season, they didn't respond. They came out and they laid an egg at home against Nebraska. They won 21-17 and were on the border of losing that game at the very end. I just think that this team doesn't have that kind of fight in them. I don't believe in Ryan Day, but it's less about that. I think this is just a styles make fights matchup. I think this is 17-14, 20-17, low scoring, really two legit defenses. And you'll notice when I talk about the Ohio State, why I'm not in on Ohio State has nothing to do with the defense. That's a legit defense right there for sure. But I think the Tennessee defense is legit too. I think these are two of, if not the two, best defenses in the college football playoff.
I think Tennessee can match for sure what Michigan did in terms of the defensive side and make that a really ugly game. Now they actually have a quarterback that can throw a forward pass as well. Yeah. You probably just need one really good drive from Nico in that offense, and I think you'll be in shape because I think the defense and the field positions are going to be pretty good in this one, just the way the defenses are playing. You're just going to have to be able to capitalize on one drive. And one thing that I'm keeping my eye out for, Tennessee 88th in the country in the red zone. Not great red zone offense. So they've got to be able to finish some drives if they want to pull off this upset.
Now, if you think I'm a complete and total idiot, which a lot of people will if they hear this, take the under in this game. Both of these defenses are very good. If you think I'm a complete idiot and Ohio State has no spine left, the under is the play. I still might take the under. I think Ohio State's defense is that good, and they might hold Tennessee to like 10 points. But I think if you don't have a side, if you're not passionate about Tennessee or Ohio State, take the under in this game. That you have two top 5 defenses going at each other. I know it's not what you want to hear for a playoff first-round game. That's probably going to be the closest of the 4, but this one's going to be low scoring.
I agree. I like the under. I'm not going to bet it. I decided I'm going to keep it. I don't want to muddle it. Just focus in on Tennessee plus 7.5. Big play there. But under 47 would definitely be my play.
So if I'm really streamlining my take, I'm saying like 31-10. I'll call my shot there. Ohio State wins 31-10. My bold prediction comes true, and the under hits.
I'll say 17-14. Tennessee wins. Ohio State misses a kick to tie the game to send it to overtime.
College kickers need to screw up this weekend, by the way.
Yeah.
We need that.
2017 Vols. If you want to move it, Joe, to DraftKings only lets you move it to minus 19, but you can get them at plus 286.
I'm not going to do that.
That's only plus 286.
That's why I'm not going to move it.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Minus 428 if you took Tennessee plus 19.
So I'm going to hold off on betting like an outlandish spread and keep them at 7.5. But yeah, that's that. Any other takes on the non-playoff bowl games? I know Beef and I talked about Memphis last week. I think we're both on them in the prestigious Frisco Bowl against West Virginia. I guess real quick, some things you need to know for these games. Let me pull up the actual bowl game names, and then we'll get out of here. The Boca Raton Bowl, Western Kentucky, JMU. Western Kentucky's quarterback, Caden Veldkamp, is in the portal, but is playing. So that's something worth noting there. Cal at UNLV in the LA Bowl. Cal's quarterback, Mendoza, opted out. UNLV is now flipped to a 3-point favorite. Georgia Southern plays Sam Houston New Orleans Bowl. Sam Houston's coach, Casey Keeler, is off to Temple. Very, very good hire, by the way. And then you have Friday, the Cure Bowl. Ohio and Jacksonville State, both teams lost their coaches. Ohio lost theirs to Charlotte. Rich Rod now back at West Virginia. And then Tulane in Florida in the Gasparilla Bowl. 13-point favorite is Florida. Darian Mensah, Tulane's starting quarterback, has transferred to that official to Duke, guys?
Yep.
Which is weird because Malik Murphy actually had a decent season.
Speaking of Duke, do you know where Malik Murphy went?
Did he commit?
Yes.
Where did he go?
He went to wait, I just sent it to Beef and I just
Kentucky.
Kentucky. Okay, I got confused because it was going to be Auburn apparently. And then Jackson Arnold went to Auburn, so he went to Kentucky.
Speaking of Auburn, did you see Zach Calzada's name popped up in
I
the?
did not.
He actually might go to Cal because Brian Harsin got hired at Cal as their OC. Oh, how the college football world turns.
I don't know if we got to the Christmas Eve one. I did kind of look at USF plus 3.5 against San Jose State. Nick Nash is like the best receiver in the country on San Jose State, and he opted out. So it's just it's based on very little. But I just feel like San Jose State probably doesn't have a ton offensively besides Nick Nash.
I got to get out of here, but I got 3 quick plays before I hop out. Georgia Southern -6, UNLV -3, and Ohio -3.5. And I will talk to you boys next week.
I will, and we'll end it on the note that the odds are -100,000 that I will sit on my couch Christmas Eve and enjoy the ever-living hell out of the Hawaii Bowl. That is one of the traditions they cannot take away from me. Christmas Eve and the Hawaii Bowl. They can take away the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving Eve, Mark.
The Jimmy Clausen Bowl.
But you can't take away the Hawaii Bowl on Christmas Eve. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to the playoff. Mark Henry Jr., Ryan Beef Coyle will be back talking about the quarterfinals later on after Christmas. For myself, Joe Tanzi, best of luck on your plays, and we'll talk to you after the first round.